The air was thick with smoke. Ash fell from the sky like black snow, covering the ruins of what used to be a busy alien city. Buildings lay broken, streets cracked open, and the once bright towers now stood like hollow skeletons in the middle. Of all this destruction lay a young alien girl. Her pale skin was streaked with dust and blood, and her silver hair was tangled. She had a wound on her side, and every breath she took was slow and heavy. She tried to move, but her legs felt like they didn't belong to her anymore. Around her, there were no voices of comfort, no helping hands. Only the distant sound of metal footsteps and the rumble of alien war machines. Her own people had been here just hours ago. She had seen them retreating, their ships rising into the black sky. They didn't look back at her. They didn't even shout a goodbye. She remembered calling out, her voice weak and trembling. But their eyes had been cold, and their faces empty of care. They had left her there, in the ashes, to die. Why? She didn't know. Maybe she was too weak, too wounded. Maybe she was already considered dead in their minds. Her fingers clawed at the ground, pulling herself under the broken wall of a destroyed shop. She hoped the shadow would hide her from the hunters, because she knew, once the enemy came, they wouldn't waste a bullet. They would drag her out, just to make her suffer. Her throat was dry, her lips cracked, her body screamed for water, for safety. But all she could do was lie there and wait. The sound of footsteps echoed through the ruined street. They were heavy, slow, and careful. Her breath caught in her throat. Not her people, she knew their sound. Not the enemies, she knew the sharp clank of their boots. This was different. A tall shadow moved through the smoke. The shape was broad-shouldered, wearing armor she had never seen before. In his hands was a black weapon, long and deadly. Her heart started to pound. She didn't know whether to stay hidden or cry for help. The figure stopped a few steps away from her hiding place. He turned his head slowly, scanning the rubble through the thin smoke. She saw his face for the first time. It was strange skin without scales, no ridges, just smooth and pale. Two sharp eyes under a thick line of dark hair. It was a human. She had heard stories about them, warriors from a distant world, dangerous and ruthless, but she had also heard whispers, rare ones, that humans could be kind. She didn't know which kind this one was. He noticed her, their eyes met. And for a moment, the world seemed to stop. She expected him to raise his weapon, to call for others. Instead, he crouched down, keeping the weapon low. From a small pouch on his side, he took out a silver flask. He opened it and placed it on the ground between them. The smell of clean water drifted up. Her throat tightened with longing, but she didn't move. It could be a trick. Her people had taught her never to trust an enemy's gift. The human didn't push it toward her. He just sat there, watching her carefully, the way his eyes moved. They didn't feel like the eyes of someone about to hurt her. Still, fear kept her still. A loud explosion shook the ground, and dust rained from the broken walls. The human's head turned sharply toward the sound. Then back to her. He made a quick motion with his hand, pointing away, signaling danger. She understood. More footsteps were coming. Heavier, faster enemy patrol. If they saw her, they would end her life. If they saw him with her, they might kill him too. The human looked at her again, and in that moment, she felt something strange. It wasn't pity. It was something stronger. It was a decision. Without a word, he stepped forward. She flinched. But before she could pull away, his arms slid under her fragile body, lifting her up. His armor was cold, but his hold was steady. Her heart raced, not from pain, but from shock. Why would he carry her? Why would he risk himself? She didn't have the answer. The sound of enemy voices grew louder. He moved quickly, his boots silent on the cracked street. Every step seemed careful but urgent. The girl's head rested against his chest, and she could hear the steady beat of his heart. It was strange, she felt safer than she had in weeks. He ducked into a side alley, weaving between broken walls. When the voices faded, he stopped in the shadow of a half-fallen building. Gently, he set her down on a pile of soft ash. She looked up at him, still unsure. He just nodded once, as if to say, "You're not alone anymore." In that moment, something changed inside her. The ashes still surrounded them. The war still raged, and her wounds still hurt, but for the first time. Since her people had left her, she felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't die here after all. The human soldier kept his back pressed against the broken wall, his eyes scanning every shadow. The girl lay on the ground beside him, her breathing shallow but steady. He didn't know her name, her story, or why she had been left behind. All he knew was that she was wounded, weak, and alone, and he couldn't just walk away. His orders were clearly Valiant survivors behind, especially the enemies. But looking at her trembling hands and the fear in her eyes, those orders felt like chains around his heart. She tried to sit up, but pain pulled her back down. He raised a hand, motioning for her to stay still. From his pouch, he pulled out the water flask again. This time, he uncapped it and held it toward her lips. Her eyes narrowed with suspicion, but the thirst was stronger than fear. She leaned forward, taking a small sip. The cool water hit her dry throat, and she swallowed quickly. He pulled the flask back before she could drink too much. He knew she'd get sick if she rushed it. She stared at him, unsure whether to thank him or keep her guard up. In the distance, the sound of metal boots on broken stone grew louder. The soldier's jaw tightened through the cracks in the wall. He saw 3 alien soldiers moving slowly, scanning the ruins with rifles. The girl stiffened, her breathing quickening. They were her own kind, yet she looked at them like they were predators. The soldier understood these weren't rescuers, they were executioners. If they found her, they wouldn't hesitate. If they found him with her, it would be the end for both. He looked at her again, and she shook her head in panic. She made a small gesture with her hand, pointing away, telling him to go, to leave her, but he didn't move. Something inside him refused to let that happen. He thought of all the soldiers he had lost, the civilians he had seen abandoned in the chaos of war. If he left her now, she would just become another body in the ashes, and he couldn't bear that thought. The patrol drew closer, their voices sharp and cruel. The soldier took a deep breath, his mind working fast. He could slip away now, disappear into the ruins, or he could take her with him and break every rule he had been given. One choice was safe, the other was dangerous, maybe even deadly. But looking at her small, trembling frame, her cracked lips, and the hopelessness in her gaze, he knew he had already made his choice without warning. He reached down and lifted her into his arms again. She gasped softly, gripping his jacket. Her body was light, far too light for someone her age, like she hadn't eaten in days. He moved slowly at first, matching his steps with the rhythm of the enemy's boots. Then, as the voices faded behind them, he quickened his pace. The streets twisted ahead like a maze. Every corner could hide danger. Every shadow could hide eyes. The girl's head rested against his shoulder. She kept glancing at him as if trying to read his face. Why was he doing this? Humans were supposed to hate her kind, but this one carried her like she was something fragile, something worth protecting. When they reached a small alley blocked by fallen beams, he set her down and cleared the way. His strength surprised her. He moved heavy rubble with a grunt, clearing just enough space for them to squeeze through. Once inside, the alley grew narrow and dark. They could hear distant gunfire echoing through the city. Every sound made her flinch, every time she looked at him. His steady expression gave her just enough courage to keep going. They found an abandoned storage room with only half a roof left. The soldier set her down in the corner, then quickly searched the area. No movement, no signs of life. He knelt beside her, pulling out a small cloth from his kit to clean her wound. She hissed in pain, but didn't push his hands away. He worked fast, wrapping her side with a strip of white bandage. It wasn't perfect, but it would stop the bleeding for now. When he finished, he sat back, wiping sweat from his forehead. Their eyes met again. There were no words, but something had passed between them. A silent promise that he wouldn't abandon her. He glanced toward the door. The sun was sinking, painting the smoke-filled sky in shades of red. Night would make moving harder. But staying here was dangerous. Patrols could sweep the area any moment. He took out a small device from his belt, a hollow map glowing faintly in the dim light. It showed a path leading out of the city toward the old forest. If they made it there, they might have a chance. He tapped the map, then pointed toward the horizon. She understood. Her legs were too weak to walk that far, but she didn't argue. Somehow, she knew he would find a way. The soldier slung his rifle across his back, then offered his hand. She hesitated, staring at it like it was something strange. Finally, she placed her hand in his. His grip was strong, warm despite the cold metal of his gloves. He pulled her gently to her feet. Keeping one arm around her for support, the decision was made. No turning back. The human was taking her with him no matter what it cost. Somewhere deep inside her chest, a feeling began to grow. It wasn't trust yet, but it was no longer fear. It was the first step toward believing that maybe, just maybe, she had been found by the right hands. The city was a maze of smoke and ruin. Every street seemed to lead into another wall of debris. The human soldier moved carefully, his eyes scanning the shadows for movement. The alien girl leaned against him, her legs too weak to carry her far. Her breathing was shallow. But she kept glancing behind them, somewhere out there. The enemy patrols were still searching. Every echo of footsteps, every faint metallic sound, made her grip his arm tighter. They kept close to the walls, slipping between collapsed buildings and twisted metal beams. The soldier's boots were almost silent, each step measured. He had moved through war zones before. But this was different. Now, it wasn't just his own life he was protecting. He was carrying the weight of someone else's survival, and that weight made every shadow feel more dangerous. The girl suddenly tapped his chest and pointed to the left. Her voice was too weak to speak, but her eyes were sharp. He followed her direction and saw what she meant: a collapsed street where the enemy had set up scanning drones. The machines hovered in place, their red lights sweeping the ruins. If they stepped into that street, the drones would detect them instantly. The soldier adjusted his path, taking a narrow alley that smelled of smoke and old fire. The alley was so dark that the only light came from cracks above. Dust drifted down with every step they took. The girl moved slower now, her energy fading. He shifted her weight into his arms again, carrying her against his chest. She didn't resist. Her eyes stayed fixed ahead, as if she trusted him to find the way. That thought gave him a strange, unexpected warmth inside. Halfway through the alley, they heard the distant hum of engines. The soldier froze, pressing his back to the wall. Through a hole in the bricks, he saw an enemy transport ship hovering low. Swept the streets, passing dangerously close to their position. The girl's fingers dug into his sleeve. They stayed perfectly still until the lights faded, and the sound of engines moved away. When it was safe again, they pushed forward. The alley opened into a wider street, but it was blocked by a huge collapsed tower. Twisted metal and broken concrete made it impossible to cross in the open. The soldier spotted a way through a gap under the wreckage, barely wide enough for them to crawl. He set the girl down and went first, clearing loose pieces of debris. Then he gestured for her to follow. She hesitated, staring into the dark space, but his steady nod convinced her. On her hands and knees, she crawled forward, her silver hair brushing against the dusty ground. The soldier followed close behind, keeping one hand on his weapon. When they emerged on the other side, the air felt colder. They had reached the edge of the old district. Beyond this point, the streets grew narrower and more dangerous, but it also meant fewer patrols. The soldier scanned the rooftops, making sure no snipers watched them. Then he guided her into an abandoned market, the stalls still holding burnt remains of food and cloth. They rested in the shadow of a broken sign. The soldier pulled out a small ration pack. Breaking it in half, he handed one piece to her. She looked at it suspiciously, but took a bite. Her eyes widened slightly. Wasn't much, but it was the first real food she'd tasted in days. He watched her eat, and for the first time since he had found her, a faint smile tugged at his lips. The peace didn't last long. The sound of distant shouts and barking orders carried through the streets. The soldier's body tensed. The enemy had found their trail. He quickly packed away what was left of the food and lifted her into his arms again. They moved through the market, weaving between fallen stalls and shattered walls. The girl's small hand gripped the front of his armor. She didn't speak, but he could feel her silent plead, "Don't stop. Don't leave me." They reached a half-collapsed building with a staircase leading down. The soldier entered cautiously, his flashlight revealing a basement lined with old storage crates. It smelled of damp stone and dust. He placed her gently on a crate and crouched near the door, listening. Heavy boots pounded above them. The voices growing louder. They were close to close. The girl's wide eyes followed his every move. If they were discovered here, there would be no escape. The soldier took a slow breath and waited. The footsteps passed overhead. A long moment of silence followed, broken only by the faint hum of distant engines. Finally, he lowered his rifle and turned back to her. They had made it through this chase, but he knew it wouldn't be the last. The city was closing in around them. They had to get out before nightfall, or they'd be trapped. He pulled the holomap from his belt again, showing her the blinking line toward the forest. She studied it, then nodded. Her face still showed pain, but her eyes now held something new: determination. The soldier offered his hand once more. She took it without hesitation this time. Together, they stepped out of the basement and back into the cold, smoke-filled air. The shadows were their only allies now, and they would have to move like ghosts to survive somewhere in the distance. Beyond the walls of fire and ruin, there was safety, and for the first time, both of them believed they might just reach it. The forest was closer now, but they were still trapped inside the dying city. The smoke from burning buildings rolled through the streets like dark waves, making it hard to breathe. The human soldier carried the alien girl through the rubble, feeling the weight of her body grow heavier with each step. She had been silent for a long time, but now her breathing sounded wrong, too fast, too shallow. He stopped in the shadow of a broken wall and set her down gently. Her face was pale, her lips dry, and her eyes were glassy. He pulled back the edge of her tunic and saw the wound on her side. It was worse than he thought. The bandage he had wrapped earlier was soaked through with blood. But the blood was not the same deep red of Human's. It was a faint silver blue. Shimmering in the dim light, she winced as he touched it. Her voice was weak, but she pointed toward the forest in the distance through slow hand gestures and broken words. She explained there was a plant that could heal her. It grew only in the deeper part of the forest, its leaves glowing faintly at night. If they reached it, she would live. If not, she would not survive the next sunrise. The soldier glanced at the streets ahead. The forest was beyond the city's eastern edge, but between them and safety were patrols, drones, and traps. It was risky enough. Carrying her, leaving her here to go alone, was even worse. Still, if he didn't get the plant, she had no chance. He thought fast, scanning the area for a safe place to hide her. They found an old underground shelter, half collapsed but still offering cover. Inside, The air was cool and smelled of earth. He lowered her onto a bed of old blankets, making sure. She was hidden from view. Her hand caught his wrist, her eyes locking onto his. It was a silent question: would he come back? He answered not with words, but by tightening his grip on her hand before letting go. Then he picked up his rifle and slipped back into the ruins. The city felt even more dangerous without her beside him. Every sound seemed louder, every shadow deeper. He moved quickly. Keeping to the alleys, he passed bodies, some human, some alien, but didn't stop. He couldn't stop. The streets gave way to cracked stone roads overgrown with weeds. Ahead, the broken city wall rose high, the only barrier between him and the forest. At the wall's base, a hole had been blasted open. He crouched low, scanning the tree line beyond. No patrols, no drones, at least not yet. He slipped through and into the forest. The air here was different, cooler, damp, filled with the sound of leaves shifting in the wind. The ground was soft under his boots. Every step took him deeper. Into the shadows of tall trees, the forest wasn't safe. He saw claw marks on the trunks, deep gouges that spoke of something big and strong. Once he heard the snapping of branches in the distance and froze. Through the trees, a massive shape moved, but it didn't come closer. He kept moving, searching. For the plant she had described, minutes turned into hours. The fading light painting everything in gray. Finally, he saw its small patches of leaves that glowed faint green in the growing darkness. He knelt and picked them carefully, their glow warm against his gloves the moment he touched them. A sharp howl echoed through the forest. Something had seen him. He stuffed the leaves into his pouch and ran, his boots pounding against the earth. Branches whipped his face as he pushed through the undergrowth. Behind him, the sound of heavy movement grew louder, but the city wall was close now. He dove through the blasted hole, rolling across the ground and back into the ruins. Whatever had followed him didn't cross the wall. He didn't slow down until he was back at the underground shelter. The girl's eyes fluttered open as he dropped to his knees beside her. He pulled out the glowing leaves and began crushing them into a paste between his fingers. The glow dimmed as he worked, the scent sharp and strange. Gently, he pressed the paste into her wound. She hissed in pain, her claws gripping the blanket. But after a moment, her breathing eased, her eyes focused more clearly on him, and her lips trembled as if trying to form words. He gave her water, holding the flask to her mouth, then sat back, watching the glow from the leaves fade into her skin. Her body relaxed, and for the first time since he had found her, she closed her eyes in peace. He stayed by her side, his rifle within reach. The city outside still burned, but here, in this quiet corner of ruin and earth, a life had been pulled back from the edge. The soldier leaned his back against the wall, his eyes never leaving the shelter's entrance. He knew they couldn't stay here long. The patrols would still be looking for them. But tonight, at least, she would live. And for now, that was enough. The first light of dawn crept into the shelter. The human soldier opened his eyes instantly, his instincts never allowing deep sleep. The alien girl was still resting, her breathing steadier now. The glowing leaf paste had done its work. Her wound looked cleaner, and her skin had more color. But rest was a luxury they could no longer afford. The forest lay ahead, but so did the hunters. He touched her shoulder gently, and her eyes opened. She didn't need words to understand. They had to move. Slowly, she sat up, testing her legs. She could stand now. Though she leaned on him for balance, he gave her a small piece of ration bread, and she ate it quickly. It wasn't enough to fill her, but it gave her strength. He gathered his gear, slung his rifle, and nodded toward the shelter's exit. They stepped out into the ruined streets. The morning fog clung to the ground, curling around their legs. It gave them cover, but it also made it harder to see. They moved quickly but silently, weaving between shadows. The girl's silver hair caught the weak light, and he pulled a scarf from his pack, wrapping it around her head. She looked at him curiously. Ani simply said, "Safer." Her eyes softened, and she didn't remove it. The streets were too quiet, no birds, no wind, only the faint hum of something mechanical in the distance. Then they heard it metal boots striking stone. The sound was rhythmic, growing louder. The soldier pulled her into a narrow gap between two walls. Through the crack, they saw a squad of alien soldiers moving in formation. Scanning the ground with devices, hunters. They weren't searching for just anyone, they were looking for. Her breath caught in her throat, and she clutched his arm. He placed a finger to his lips. The squad passed, their voices sharp. The girl understood some of the words. Find her. Orders from command, no mercy. Her chest tightened, even her own kind wanted her dead. She wasn't a soldier, she wasn't a spy, so why? The soldier saw the pain in her expression, but didn't ask. Some truths could wait until survival was certain. They slipped away when the hunters turned the corner. But the silence didn't last long. A sharp, metallic whistle cut through the air. Suddenly, the streets erupted with noise, shouts, running boots, and the sound of drones activating. The hunters had found tracks, whether they belonged to her or not. It didn't matter. The chase had begun. The soldier grabbed her hand and pulled her into the deeper ruins. They moved through collapsed buildings, over piles of rubble. Once, a beam gave way under their feet, and they fell through the floor into a lower level. The impact knocked the wind from them. But they got up fast. Above them, the hunters. Voices grew louder. They had to keep moving. The lower level was dark, the only light coming from cracks in the ceiling. The soldier led the way, his steps careful. The girl followed closely, her breathing fast. They crawled under a broken staircase, squeezing through a narrow tunnel at the other end. They emerged into an open courtyard, but they had no time to breathe. Shadows moved on the rooftops. Snipers, a shot rang out, striking the wall beside them. The soldier pulled her down and rolled behind a pile of debris. Dust filled the air, stinging their eyes. Another shot followed, splintering the stone. They couldn't stay pinned here. He spotted an old drainage tunnel on the far side of the courtyard, half hidden under fallen metal. It was their only way out. But the open space between them and the tunnel felt like a death trap. He looked at her, and she understood without words. When the next shot came, they moved. The soldier fired a burst from his rifle toward the rooftop to force the sniper to duck. They ran low, their feet pounding the cracked ground. Bullets and plasma bolts whizzed past. The girl stumbled once, but he caught her and kept moving. They dove into the tunnel just as another shot rang out. The darkness swallowed them. The air was damp and smelled of rust. Water dripped somewhere ahead, echoing in the tight space. They crouched and moved through the tunnel, the sound of pursuit fading behind them. When they emerged, they were outside the city wall. The forest loomed ahead, tall and dark. The girl hesitated, glancing back at the burning skyline. Her home was gone, and her people had abandoned her. The soldier placed a hand on her shoulder, drawing her eyes back to the trees ahead. There was no going back, only forward. They entered the forest, the ground soft under their boots. The air smelled of damp earth and green leaves. For the first time, the sounds of war were far away. But the hunt wasn't over. The soldier knew the hunters would follow, and in this forest, the enemy would not be their only danger. As the shadows deepened around them, the girl walked closer to him. Her hand brushed his arm once, just enough to let him know she was still there. He glanced at her and saw something new in her. Eyes not just fear, but trust. The hunt had driven them this far, but it would also force them to fight together. The forest grew darker as they went deeper. Tall trees blocked the light. their branches twisting like giant claws. The ground was uneven, littered with fallen logs and roots that caught at their boots. Every sound felt louder. Hear the snap of a twig, the rustle of leaves, even the beat of their own hearts. The human soldier moved first, his eyes always searching ahead. The alien girl followed close, one hand gripping his sleeve for balance. Behind them, faint but certain, came the distant sound of pursuit. The hunters had entered the forest. They had no map for this place. Only the girl's memory of certain paths from her childhood. Her people rarely came here to many predators. Too many legends about cursed ground, but she remembered one way through. It ended at a narrow suspension bridge hanging over a deep river gorge. If they could cross it, the hunters would have a harder time following. The sound of rushing water reached them before the bridge came into view. The soldiers stopped at the tree line, scanning the clearing ahead. The bridge swayed gently in the wind. Its wooden planks weathered and cracked. Some were missing completely, leaving gaps that showed the churning white water far below. The supports creaked under the weight of nothing. Crossing it would be risky even without the enemy close behind. The girl's steps slowed when she saw it. Her eyes widened, fear flickering across her face. She shook her head, pointing at the gaps, but the soldier didn't turn back. He studied the bridge, tested the first plank with his boot, and then looked at her. "We don't have another choice," his eyes seemed to say. From the forest came the faint echo of voices. Sharper now, closer. There was no time to argue. He stepped onto the bridge first, the wood groaning under his weight. The rope rails felt rough against his hands. The girl followed, moving slowly, her steps trembling. The planks shifted and dipped under her feet. Halfway across, the wind picked up, making the bridge sway harder. She froze, clutching the rope with both hands. Her breathing came fast, and she couldn't take another step. The soldier turned back, holding out his hand. His voice was low but steady, telling her to focus on him. She stared at his hand for a long moment, then reached for it. Her foot landed on the next plank, just as a shot rang out from the forest. The wood splintered beside her foot, and she stumbled. The soldier caught her arm, pulling her upright. More shots followed, some striking the ropes. The bridge jerked violently. From the far side of the gorge, the soldier fired back, forcing the shooters to duck, but the bridge was weakening. One rope on the left side snapped, making the whole structure tilt. The soldier's eyes locked on hers. "Run," he mouthed. She shook her head, terrified. Then another shot rang out. An instinct took over. She ran, her steps quick and desperate. Planks cracked under her feet, some breaking away entirely. She leaped over a gap and nearly slipped. But the soldier was right behind her, halfway to the far side. A burning arrow arched through the air and struck the rope above them. Flames spread fast, the dry fibers hissing and curling. The bridge began to sag. The soldier pushed her forward, his boots thudding against the boards. She reached the far side just as another plank gave way behind her. She turned, eyes wide, to see him still on the bridge. The flames were spreading toward him. The ropes strained and groaned. Then, with a loud crack, part of the bridge gave way completely. He grabbed the remaining rope, hanging over the drop. The girl cried out, dropping to her knees at the edge. Without thinking, she reached down, her small hands gripping his wrist. Her arms shook with the effort, but she refused to let go. "Pull," his eyes urged. Her teeth clenched, and she pulled. With all her strength, the soldier swung his leg up, hooking it onto the edge of the cliff. With one final push and her help, he rolled onto solid ground. For a moment, they just lay there, breathing hard. The flames consumed what was left of the bridge, sending it crashing into the river below. When he finally stood, he looked at her. Her hands were scraped and trembling, but she didn't seem to notice. She only stared at him as if making sure he was real. For the first time, she spoke his language clearly. "I would not leave you," she said slowly. His mouth curved into a faint smile. He didn't answer with words, just a nod that said he understood. They turned toward the forest ahead. The path was still dangerous, but the hunters would have to find another way across. For now, they had a head start, and they would need it. The forest thinned as they moved forward. The trees gave way to low hills, covered in grass that swayed under the wind. The sun was higher now, its light warm against their faces. For the first time in days, the alien girl felt the air without the taste of smoke, but her legs were weak, and every step took effort. The human soldier slowed his pace so she could keep up. He didn't complain, didn't rush her, he just stayed beside her. They stopped by a small stream to drink. The water was cold and clear, and it washed the dust from their lips. The girl knelt at the bank, cupping the water in her hands. When she looked up, she saw him scanning the horizon, always alert, even here, far from the burning city. He didn't relax. She wondered if he was always like this, or if it was because of her. They moved again, following the stream until they reached a rocky slope. From the top, the soldier spotted movement metal, glinting in the sunlight. It wasn't the enemy this time. It was a human outpost, hidden in the hills. A few watchtowers stood against the skyline, and figures in human armor moved along the walls. The girl froze, fear rising in her chest. Humans were still strangers to her kind, and strangers were dangerous. But the soldier turned to her and spoke softly. His voice was calm, his tone certain. She didn't understand all the words, but she understood his meaning safe. Her heart still pounded, but she followed him. Every step closer made her wonder if she was making a mistake. If these humans would welcome her or see her as an enemy. When they reached the outer wall, human guards appeared, weapons raised. Their eyes went from the soldier to the alien girl, narrowing with suspicion. One of them barked a question. The soldier stepped in front of her, his body a shield. His voice was firm, his words sharp. The guards hesitated, glancing at each other. Finally, one of them lowered his weapon and signaled to open the gate. Inside, the outpost was small but busy. Humans moved between supply crates and repair stations. Some stared openly at the girl. She kept close to the soldier, her fingers brushing his sleeve now and then. He led her to a small tent near the edge of camp. There a medic approached, eyes wary but curious. The soldier explained her wound and handed over the remaining healing leaves. The medic examined her, cleaned the injury, and wrapped it with fresh bandages. She didn't flinch when they worked. She had been through worse. Days passed in the camp. The girl began to regain her strength. She learned a few human words, enough to answer simple questions. The soldier visited often, sometimes bringing food, sometimes just sitting nearby. They didn't talk much, but they didn't need to. Each glance, each quiet moment carried more than words could. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, she found him preparing his gear. He was being sent back out on another mission. She stood in the doorway, unsure what to say. Finally, she stepped closer and held out a small strip of cloth, the one he had used to wrap her wound the first day they met. It was clean now, folded neatly. She placed it in his hand. Her voice was soft but steady. "Thank you for not leaving me." He looked at the cloth, then at her. For a moment, his expression softened in a way she hadn't seen before. He tucked the cloth into his pocket and nodded once. No promises, no dramatic words, just a simple truth in his. Icy would remember her. The next morning, she stood at the edge of the camp. Watching him leave, his figure grew smaller against the horizon. But she held on to the memory of his hand, pulling her from the ashes. He had given her more than safety. He had given her proof that kindness could exist even in the middle of war. As the wind moved through the hills, carrying the distant sound of boots on stone, the alien girl knew one thing for certain. She had been left to die by her own kind. But in the hands of a stranger, she had found hope.